Yesterday, the Biden administration defended their continuation of a Trump-era deportation policy in court, arguing that Title 42 is a necessary pandemic public health measure. They also asked the court for permission to continue expelling migrants without screening them for asylum. During hearings, a DOJ attorney said, quote, under the Title 42 order, those non-citizens can be rapidly screened and then quickly expelled, substantially reducing the risk of transmission.
In 2021, Customs and Border Patrol along the southern border deported over 1 million migrants under the guise of stopping the spread of COVID-19. Title 42 expulsions peaked over the summer when over 315,000 migrants were deported between May and August alone. Team Rising is here to weigh in. Rebecca Azor is a political journalist. Sam Gadoldig is a partner at CGCN Group, and we're glad to have both of you with us.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So, Rebecca, I think it's fair, right, to ask the Biden administration, what the heck is going on, given how much condemnation there was of the Trump-era migrant policy?
Yeah, it's definitely fair to ask the Biden administration what's going on, because we have to understand when he was campaigning, he being Biden, he campaigned a lot on these immigration policies that he said he would roll back that were Trump immigration policies, including, the Title 42, right, that Trump put in place. And here is the thing, though. All of these promises that were made to the immigrants, we see that here in this Title 42 and under the guise of it being a public health situation, we know that there's nothing different between what Biden is doing now and what Trump did on the onset of the pandemic. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people are afraid to hold Joe Biden accountable and call a thing, but we need to call a thing. And whether you voted for him or not, the same way that we held Donald Trump accountable and how he treated immigrants, we need to do the same thing here with what Joe Biden is doing. And it's funny that they want to say this is a public health situation. We got to make sure that we don't bring in more COVID-19 here in the U.S., from immigrants, coming over at the Mexico border. But we have the largest cases being reported out of the U.S., period, anyhow. And with these immigrants going into into ICE custody, even the conditions there are bringing them, COVID-19, these immigrants. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, I mean, we have some of those past promises right here. In tweets, Biden pledged to restore dignity and humanity to the immigration system and accused Donald Trump of raising the standard of cruelty with his inhumane immigration policies, as well as assaulting human dignity and everything we stand for as a nation. What do you think?
Yeah, it's like, so they raise the standards. That's the Ratchet effect. So Trump raises the standard of cruelty, and Biden's like, okay, that's my new standard. I will enforce that.
While still calling it cruelty.
Yeah, right. That's the difference between the two parties. Well, the one feels a little bit bad about the evil things they do.
One does the high five to the drowning person in the water in that meme. What do you think, Sam?
I'm not an immigration specialist, but I do think there's tremendous hypocrisy with this Chicken Little effect. And you go back to when George H.W. Bush was president, and then W was a war criminal, and McCain was unfit, and Romney put dogs on tops of cars, and then you get Trump, and it must be a policy that someone down there that is an expert at this stuff feels like they need to have intact, or I assume Biden would get rid of it. But I assume someone that knows what they're doing down there says they absolutely need it, and that's why Biden's fighting for it. I just find the whole thing amusing. Democrats run these campaigns, turn our guys into, the second coming of, the worst people on the planet Earth. And then here we are talking about why nothing's changed. So
well, to zero in on something you are an expert on, as a corporate lobbyist, you're talking to corporate America all the time, but as a Republican activist, you're talking to grassroots-based Republicans all the time. So how is the issue of immigration playing out at that intersection now, and how much does that have to do with this visible split that we've seen with the Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, the immigration issue is and always has been. I'm old enough to remember when the Lincoln Project founders were cutting all the ads that all of these governors and presidential candidates live by. Build the damn wall, the McCain ad that I think Rick Wilson probably cut, and it just it's a great issue for Republicans getting unified. It always has been. The chamber is completely on the wrong side of the party. I don't know that they have any friends with the Democrats, but they've lost their base core support with Republicans supporting the business community. The one thing Trump did do is completely turn allies and politics upside down, and it's just an interesting world these days. And Biden's pushing for Trump policies, and the chamber is supporting Dems, and the Dems don't want their support. He flipped the scripts in so many ways. It's more interesting now.
Yeah. How do you think this issue is going to play out, Rebecca, for the Democratic side, in the upcoming elections? Because when you promise to end these cruel practices, or when you say these practices are cruel and you're going to end them, and then you don't, obviously there on some other issues, maybe you could say, well, there's only so much Biden can do, but here's something he could definitely do and he's not doing it. So how can they make a case to anyone who cared about this but you should still vote for me when I'm doing exactly the same thing as the other side?
I think that this is a time where, voting is looked at very different. We're fighting for our voting rights. There's so much surrounding that, right? But in this, it's 2022, right? We've seen how we can change things when it comes to our vote. We've seen how important our votes come. So these Democrats need to understand, if you aren't doing what you promised you said you would do, and when you're held accountable for it, you are quiet, because as we seen yesterday in the press conference, there wasn't much of immigration talk after you literally fought for Title 42, and then you have this press conference and nothing is being said. No conversations are being made, and this is what we really have to focus on. The people are focusing on this more when it comes to voting. What did this person do? When they were seated, did they do anything that they were campaigning off of? This is going to be the focus. So I think it's going to be a hard no, for a lot of people who are looking for votes, for a lot of Democrats who are going to be looking for votes or looking for support. But also it's I feel like in this moment too, we have the other side of it, where it's we can't touch, we can't have that conversation about Joe Biden. We can't do that because, he's better than, he came in, he's different than, he's not Donald Trump. So let's give him some. No, whoever is the leader, whoever you are, we need to hold you accountable. Why did you run off of this? Why did you make this a main policy when you were campaigning, that you would assist immigrants, you would help them, you would roll back Trump policies? And yet you get seated and it's all different. So I think it's going to be a very interesting way. Democrats are going to be swimming, looking for votes, and people are going to be like, no, remember when you did this? So, yeah.
Yeah, and Sam, to go back to the Ratchet analogy, if Republicans do come back into power and they come back in a place where Biden has kept a lot of the Trump policies in place, clearly they're going to want to ratchet it further. Is there a lot of appetite among Republicans now to extend the crackdown, and what would that look like in practice? Or are they nervous about creating new images of child separation, because that's the one thing that isn't happening anymore, that then galvanizes a completely depressed Democratic base?
I think the Democratic base being depressed is part of this. I also think that, it's not lost on Republicans that when Trump started talking about immigration, he and in the last four kind of years, we've done better with Hispanic voters than we ever had. You had George W. Bush giving speeches in kind of, pathetic Spanish, and, Trump never tried that. Republicans on the Hill, they're not trying that. They're talking the way they would talk, and they're saying the things they want to say. And the Hispanic vote, the share that Republicans are getting across the country is rising. It's going up. So I don't think they think they're wrong-footed at all. I think they're making progress with Hispanic voters. I think they think that saying you're being tough at the border is not talking down to them or insulting to them in any way. And I think they feel very emboldened that the rhetoric that, the campaigns get involved in is actually a good policy. We should have a secure border. There should not be people streaming over the border with COVID, spreading it to our kids. So, there's a million talking points that I think they absolutely do believe in. And, Rebecca hit on it. I think these Democrats are kind of, in this weird netherland where, they don't know what they're for. They don't know how to talk to these voters. They think that talking down to them works. And our vote share is going up. We're doing fine with Hispanic voters. We're picking up seats.
All right. Sam, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And we will have more Rising right after this.